over CFLs. One, they have a vastly extended lifetime, with some bulbs being known to last up to 15 years. Secondly, they are very efficient. We can save up to 35% of the electricity that we use every day just by switching to an LED light. These make them much better choices than the current CFLs that are used in McMurtry College. Now, McMurtry College is one of the 11 residential colleges or dorms that we have here at Rice. And being built in 2009, it's the newest. Now, being the newest has a few advantages, notably that they have separate meters for all their electricity usage. That means that we can tell how much electricity is used for lighting versus how much is used for, say, heating and cooling. This was very important when we were doing our calculations into how much electricity was used and how much we could save. Now I'll hand it over to Amanda to talk about the logistics behind the switch.
Thank you. So one of the first things that we noticed on the logistics side is when we talked with Rice Housing and Dining, we found out that all of the lights at McMurtry and indeed throughout much of Rice has plug-in compact fluorescent light bulbs. That means that you can't just get the screw-in ones and go have the local maintenance crew go and switch all them out. And then we had to hire a third-party contractor to do this work, to do all the electrical work. Now there's two options generally when you have to do these types of installations, when you have the plug-in fluorescent. You can either get completely new light fixtures that are specific for LEDs, or you can retrofit the existing fixtures. That way they'll be able to accept LEDs. Either way, it takes an electrician's work to be able to do that. So we obtained a bid from C&D Electric from Rice Housing and Dining, and they gave us a bid for the retrofit kits, which from what they've told us are now competitive with the new fixtures. We also recommend, if this project be undertaken, that Rice undergo a test pilot period with the students to find out what color temperature is preferred, because we would hate for this big investment to be made, because LED light bulbs individually are still fairly expensive. But we would hate to have all this money spent just to find out that the students find the light too cool or too dim or aren't happy with the color temperature because they're going to be living in the residential colleges. So we thought that it would be a good idea to do a test run first. As far as our financial analysis, we had to make a lot of assumptions to make our calculations. The first being the amount of light bulb and fixture counts. Now, we actually walked through the college and we used floor plans, and Rice Housing and Dining was able to tell us exactly how many bulbs of which type were in which type of room. So we feel like we got a pretty good number for that. We also used 17% electricity that was from lighting. This was from an energy model that Richard Johnson provided for us, specifically for McMurtry College. We also assumed an electricity price of 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Now this can change because we assumed this over the entire 10-year period that we evaluated the project. We also found an average of 28% electricity savings. As Ethan mentioned, it can vary. There's a range from 23 to 35% for the types of bulbs that are currently used at McMurtry, but on average we found it was about 28%. So that's what we assumed in our calculations. Finally, we talked with Rice Housing and Dining and found out that they, on average, take about 8 minutes per bulb to replace them, and they replace about 360 CFLs at McMurtry per year. So we use this in our calculations, and then we have less bulbs that are being changed out after the LEDs, which I'll talk about in a moment. And finally, we're going to have recycling savings. CFLs have to be recycled, as Quazi will talk about a little bit more, and we won't have to do that with the LEDs when they get replaced. So that'll be a savings in money also. Now, one of the big assumptions that we had to make was how long the bulbs were going to last, because we've heard that LEDs last a lot longer than CFLs, and that's one of the good reasons to switch over to them. But there's not a lot of data that tells us exactly how long they're going to last. Now, manufacturers usually will guarantee a certain period. They'll have like a 3 or 5 year warranty, but they'll also tell you that the lifetime runs, say, on average about 50,000 hours. Now, we know at McMurtry that they're not used all of the time, all the hours of the day, and all the times of the year, because students aren't living in there during the winter breaks and the summer breaks. So based on our estimate of how long those lights are actually used, we came up with a maximum bulb lifetime of about 10 years. Now, we don't know exactly when the bulbs are going to fail, but we do know that LEDs have a very predictable life curve. So we assumed the first year about 5% were going to fail. Then we assumed 1% per year failure until year, animation didn't work, until year 8, where we thought that they would start failing a little bit more, and by year 11 we assumed they would all have to be replaced. So we assumed a maximum of lifetime of 10 years, and we included replacements through year 10. On average, we came up with about 29 bulbs per year that would need to be replaced. So our capital cost ended up being $47,745. This was for all the electrical work and all the bulbs to be purchased initially. We also calculated a savings from both electricity, maintenance, and recycling of $6,337 per year. When we were evaluating how the net present value and the internal rate of return, we used the Rice endowment, which is where 40% of Rice's operating revenues come from, and the 10-year value is 8.6%. So that's what we used in our calculations. And we came up with a kind of interesting result. Our net present value actually turned out to be negative, $5,709 over the 10-year period. And our internal rate of return was 5.8%. So that's why you see our 8.6% is higher than 5.8%. But we also found a payback period of 7.5 years. So it really depends on where that money is coming from and if it would have been invested in the Rice endowment, because Rice endowment only provides for 40% of the costs of the university. So we did have a negative net present value, but we had a very reasonable payback period if you don't take into account the time value of money. And now I'm going to hand it over to Quazi to talk more about the environmental benefits.
So besides the financial benefits, which seem to be kind of moderate, given the net present value as Amanda discussed, we also look at the environmental assessment of our proposal of replacing the CFLs in the McMurtry college with LEDs. We looked at the impacts that this replacement will have on the air or climate, soil resources, and water quantitatively, which I will discuss in the next slide. And we looked at the total cradle to grave life cycle analysis for this, starting from the raw materials towards the manufacturing and packaging, incorporating the transportation usage as well as the disposal stage. We looked at the energy footprint reduction, which will take place if we replace the CFLs with LEDs, and we did not have the assessment for the recycling for LEDs because there have not been many studies in that region comparing the recycling stages in terms of energy footprint between the CFLs and the LEDs. And CFLs tend to have mercury as a major constituent in their manufacturing, so that problem actually goes away when you actually replace them with LEDs in any situation. And then we had the reduction, of course, in the carbon footprint during the energy consumption or electricity consumption, because LEDs tend to save some amount of kilowatt hour when it's used in lieu of the CFLs. So coming on to the quantitative analysis, so we use the US Department of Energy comparative life cycle analysis characterization factors. They took 15 of them spanning across soil, water and land impacts, water and air impacts. So the first one is the reductions in the air impacts. So we took the global warming potential, which is measured in terms of the equivalent amount of carbon dioxide. So it takes into account other greenhouse gases as well and expresses that in terms of the carbon dioxide equivalence. And there is the ozone formation and ozone depletion potential as well, because you have many processes like refrigeration which use compounds like CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, which deplete ozone in the stratosphere, which are predominantly from the manufacturing stage of both the lamps. So with LEDs, we observe around a reduction of 55 to 60% in all these impacts in the air or climate. With the water pollution, there were three main parameters. One was the freshwater and marine toxicity effects, and there was eutrophication potential. So eutrophication potential was measured in terms of the equivalent of phosphates. So there are nitrogen phosphorus, which if they are present in excess in water bodies, can cause several problems in terms of death of the aquatic life, and there are toxicity, so that's not exactly carcinogenic, but then there are carcinogenic effects also. So that's why measure in terms of the equivalence of chemicals like 1,2-dichlorobenzene, which is a carcinogen. So that's so we accounted for both the toxic and non-toxic, carcinogenic and non-carcinogenic effects as well. So we had the reductions also, as you can see, around 60%. For the land impacts, we had different parameters. So we had the landfill parameters, which took into account the radioactive waste being disposed from both the kind of lamps during the total life cycle process, and we had the hazardous as well as non-hazardous. For non-hazardous, actually the reduction were the least, as you can see, around 44%, because LEDs in their manufacturing also have a lot of semiconductor materials whose impact has not been kind of established what exactly they have on the land or soil, but they still are in significant amounts. So that's something which needs to be more dealt in the future. So for the energy footprint, the usage phase actually dominated for both the CFLs and LEDs, contributing to more than 90% of the total energy footprint in both the cases. The transportation phase, as you can see, is very small as compared to the other two stages, the manufacturing and the usage. And the raw materials and the recycling phase is not there in the comparison, because for LEDs there's no stringent characterization factors for these two usage phases. And then there's reduction with LEDs in both the manufacturing, packaging and the usage phases, respect 22% and 57% respectively. So the net energy footprint is nearly 56%. So you can see that the usage phase actually has the maximum impact in the reduction when we switch from CFLs to LEDs in terms of energy footprint. So there were a lot of uncertainties and assumptions we took during the environmental assessment. So one was that there's a lack of reliable studies on energy footprint of LEDs, specifically for the raw materials and recycling associated with them. And there are no stringent regulations for the recycling of LEDs actually right now in US. So that's something which needs to be further developed, and we need to have characterization factors so that we can have a comparative analysis in that stage as well. And LEDs lamp have different manufacturers, so they will have different specifications. So instead of using that and assigning, so it was difficult to assign weightage to different performances of different lamps. So that's why we took the total lighting output as a fundamental unit in our life cycle analysis. And it's a reasonable assumption, although it will have some uncertainties associated to it, but still taking that because it's directly related to the energy consumption in terms of kilowatt hour or joules. So now I will be handing over to Ethan to discuss the brief recommendations from our proposal.
Thanks, Quazi. So as we've gone over, switching to LEDs from the current CFLs would give great savings in both electricity and labor. As Quazi mentioned, there are vast environmental benefits as well. Some of these come from the reduction in greenhouse gases and other air pollutants from power stations. When we use less electricity here, it means less power that we're needing to pull from power stations, which means they have to work less hard and therefore pollute less. There's also a reduction in waste, both both the amount of waste and a reduction in hazardous waste, which you see in CFLs. Finally, there are other benefits beyond financial and environmental. The university has an opportunity here to really increase its reputation. By implementing this newer, greener technology, Rice University can build a reputation of being a green, forward-looking university. In doing so, they could increase everything from student enrollment to faculty recruitment to even donations from environmentally minded donors. So as you can see, switching to LEDs will save money, will save electricity, and will benefit the environment and Rice University. the benefits far outweigh the costs in this case. It could potentially serve as a test case for switching all the colleges, if not all of Rice, to these new LED system. And the payback the payback period is a short 7.5 years. Given all this information, our team strongly recommends that Rice University follow through on the proposal of switching all the lights in McMurtry College to LEDs. Now I'd like to open the floor to any questions that you might have.
Richard, do you have first?
Sure, thanks. Excellent presentation. I have several questions, so which one am I going to take first? So let's talk about your calculation of savings. How much of that was related to energy? How much of that was related to maintenance? And tell me in particular how you quantified the maintenance savings.
Sure. Actually, most of it was due to electricity. I think probably 5-6 of it, maybe about 5,000 of the 6,300 something per year was from electricity savings. For maintenance, we had the 8 minutes per CFL count. We had how many approximately are changed out per year. So what we did is we went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They did a survey in the Harris County area in 2009 of different types of occupations. So we took the maintenance, I forgot what the name of the full category was, but there was a maintenance category and used an average hourly rate because we're not privy to that information from Rice. So we used an hourly rate, estimated the 8 minutes per bulb, and estimated how long it would take, how many hours per year. I think it turned out to be about 48 hours per year that's spent changing bulbs out. And then we did the equivalent for the LEDs, assuming an average of 29 bulbs per year. Same labor rate. We did adjust for inflation between 2009 and 2016 dollars.
So that 8 minutes per bulb literally as soon as someone first touches the fixture to when they're done? Or does it count the time where they go and get a ladder, they have to get the bulb, they have to walk up to the room, oh, I forgot the master keys, and go back up there. I had to arrange a time when the student wasn't there because I don't want to freak the students out, and then, I mean, it's more than an 8-minute process.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. That's what Rice Housing and Dining gave us as an average. I would think it would include the time that they had to go get their ladder and walk up the floors and get the bulb, but I'm not positive.
I think their maintenance number is probably conservative.
Okay, then we'd have more savings.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. And so the second question I have is, do you think we should be using today's most current price of electricity in the savings, or do you think we should use some sort of longer time period, historical average, or something like that? Since you're dealing with an investment that's going to be with us for a while.
Yeah, we did have to simplify our calculations, and I think that is one of the downfalls is assuming the same electricity rate. The other downfall is assuming the same bulb cost, because we assumed a $2 per kilolumen, because when you start talking with LEDs, you start talking about luminous output rather than just watts. So that number was from the end of 2015 from the DOE. That's sure to fall also, and the bulb costs do factor into this. So our numbers are very conservative. It would be more accurate if you did some kind of decline curve throughout the 10-year period.
How much did you say the project cost overall?
It was $47,745, I think. That's the initial capital cost. And that does include all of the labor to do the retrofits and the initial bulb installation.
Okay. Any idea of what my CO2 reductions would be? How many tons of
I don't
CO2?
remember what the number is. We calculated it.
Yeah, it's
It's in the report.
Okay.
Gosh, I can't remember what it is now.
Have the report. Would you like it to give you?
I'm sorry, I've been hogging the Q&A. Y'all feel free to answer any questions.
Really appreciate you being here as the client. It's, it's really valuable for you to be here as someone who
I'm
can
glad to be
consider
here.
this.
Yeah.
So in McMurtry is a very new college, and so
Yes.
it's all got CFLs, which already get you most of the energy savings relative to incandescents. There's also a possibility, not for sure, but it seems like there are probably rooms where you have regular fluorescence where it may be possible to just swap in a CFL tube, or a LED tube. Are there other places on campus that you think might be better suited for a change out, because you'd be replacing replacing incandescents, or not need to do changing the fixture or any other reason?
Well, from my experience as a student at Rice, I know a lot of the buildings where classrooms are have these longer fluorescent tubes, which could be replaced with LED tubes. However, I know all of the dorms currently have used CFLs pretty much exclusively, whatever type of room or common room or lounge it might be. So any future work in the residential colleges would necessitate a retrofit.
McMurtry is pretty indicative of what we get in any of the residential colleges. Student question.
So the carbon dioxide saving just from the energy consumption is around 36 tons CO2 equivalent per year.
Per year?
Yeah, and that's just for the energy consumption. So there is a separate estimate for the whole life cycle.
Sure. Thank you.
One student question.
Ainsley, I'm going to call on you if you don't ask a question.
So how much, you said the usage part is the main part of the environmental metrics. Do you know the percentage? I think it was mentioned earlier, but of other parts to the calculation?
Of
Like transportation, manufacturing, just
Okay.
as compared to usage.
yeah, so the users actually had contributes. So for CFLs it was around 92%. That was contributed by usage actually to the energy footprint, and for LEDs it was around 95%. Which was good. And the transportation phase actually has a high energy footprint as compared to CFL for LEDs.
Oh.
But it doesn't contribute that much, it's a very small fraction,
Right.
less than 5% or something. So that's why it doesn't show up too much on the net reduction.
Looks like the team. Great presentation.